Spoon carving is really a blast. This is something I've really come to enjoy. And in fact, I'm power carving the spoon. So one of the byproducts of that is the tools that commonly get used for this kind of stuff don't have dust shrouds on them. So what can happen is we have part of a spoon in our hands and parts that don't look like a spoon, a bunch of chips and dust all over the shop, all over the air. So in addition to using these tools to carve the spoon, I'm using this Oneida BenchTop Dust Collector in order to grab onto the chips and the dust as I go. So it's positioned here on the bench, needs to be within 20 inches or less of where you're working. It does have variable speed on the fans, so you can control how much or how little air you need to move depending on what it is that you're doing. So you'll see that it really does a nice job of keeping the environment clean. And what's going to happen as we work through the process here, something to watch for is we're going to run the dust collector throughout this process right now, but we're going to grab a portion here where we don't use it and give you a little split screen so you can see what the environment looks like when we are using it and when we're not using it. Now, in the world of spoon carving, here's what's about to happen. I'm going to start with a ball gouge, and I'll be using that in order to do the hollowing that we need on the spoon. Once I'm done with that, a die grinder with a cutting burr is going to be our next tool, and that's going to go a long way toward rough shaping the outside. Once we're done and the shaping is complete with that die grinder, we're going to come back with a sander. And with the sander actually mounted in the vise, we're going to start working on smoothing up the outside of that spoon. And really on that sanding step is really where we're going to see the gain we get from having the BenchTop Dust Collector in place. So enough said, let's make chips and make a spoon. The dust collector has 6 fans and as a result produces 585 cubic feet per minute of airflow. Power carving spoons is a great example where it's better to take the tool to the work than the work to the tool. So a good solid vise is a great place to grab onto the spoon. And one of the things I learned doing these is that it's best to do the bowl hollowing first. I'm doing the bowl hollowing with what's called a ball gouge on basically an angle grinder. And that does a really good job of getting into the bowl. It's not chipping the wood, it's leaving a pretty good surface finish behind. That being said, it is good to work your way downhill in the grain. So I'm trying to always go from the top of the bowl toward the bottom of the bowl with my cuts in order to get the best surface finish. Remember that we want to go deep here to make the spoon useful, but don't go so deep that we're turning it into a funnel instead of a spoon. When you've got a shape that you like, then with this particular tool, I can change to what's called a contour sander. And it's basically a tiny form of a random orbit sander using self-adhesive sandpaper on the discs. And I'm starting with 100 grit, and it lets me ease right down into that bowl, take out the facets. And two, I don't necessarily want to take all the facets out because I do like the hand cut look that I can get from this. So I want to clean it up, but not clean it up too much. And then just like I would with any woodworking project, go through a progression of grits to make it smoother and smoother and smoother. Next thing I'm going to do is work on the outside of the bowl, and I'll do that with a die grinder that's set up with a cutting burr. You can get lots and lots of different shapes and profiles of cutting burrs, and having different profiles on hand is good for this kind of work because you could also use a cutting burr for the inside of the spoon bowl if you had a die grinder. And the way I'm gauging this is just by frequently feeling from the inside of the bowl to the outside of the bowl. I'm gauging that thickness with my fingers to make sure I don't go too far and make the resulting bowl too thin. At the same time, I'm working down toward the handle, and I like to try to make the handles on these things a little bit curved instead of just a straight handle. Visually, I think it gives it a little better look, and organically in your hand, tactily, I think it feels better in your hand when that handle's got a little bit of a curve to it. In order to wrap up the handle, it's just going to take clamping, unclamping, reclamping the spoon in a variety of different positions so that you can get to the entire handle. And what I'm after here really is just rounding in addition to this little bit of a curve I'm putting into by introducing that curved shape. And just keep repositioning it. Now with the dust collector, what I have found is it's best if the work you're doing is immediately in front of the dust collector. That really helps performance a lot. So part of what I'm doing here is keeping the cutting side as much as possible facing the dust collector. I love this step where with the cutting burr I'm doing some pretty aggressive shaping on the spoon here, and I am really amazed at the way that that dust collector is grabbing those chips and pulling them toward the filter. What's helping to keep my environment clean here is this is a dual filter system, and the main filter is a MERV 15 filter. With the roughing work done with the cutting burr, now I'm ready to do some sanding. And I'm going to do that with a sanding disc mounted onto the angle grinder. In this case, it's easier to take the work to the tool to do the shaping. So I'm not really squeezing the angle grinder in the vise, I'm just gently holding it and then running the spoon over it, keeping it going in a fluid motion, and basically riding over all of the facets that were created by the cutting burr and the die grinder, and getting those facets to change from valleys and mountains to just nice rounded surfaces. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder here. You're done when you think you're done. There's no right or wrong about this. Once you've gone as far as you can go working through multiple grits with this sander, then the next step is just jump back to a conventional random orbit sander, and that'll help you get into spots, especially kind of the neck of the spoon where the handle joins the bowl, that the sanding disc might not have allowed you into. If you don't have a die grinder with a sanding disc, you could do all of the sanding work just simply using your random orbit sander to take that from start to finish. That's way too much fun. I really enjoy carving these, and I like leaving them, although they're power carved, I like leaving them a little bit faceted, a little bit rustic looking, so it's got that hand look to it. I really can't say enough about the environmental change, the environmental gain of having this running while I'm doing this. And you can just see from the filter here, the pre-filter, how much stuff this has grabbed. And of course, there's another filter behind that that's grabbing any finer stuff that goes through. And the other thing I want to point out about this unit is that it does have a 110 volt outlet on it. So tools up to 10 amps, you could plug the dust collector in, plug that tool into the dust collector, and then be running out here without having to run another extension cord or whatever. So to wrap up your spoon, a little bit of mineral oil on this will make it look like this. This is apple wood I'm working with. This one is also apple. And mineral oil does a great job of protecting that, and you can easily refresh it whenever it needs to be rejuvenated just a little bit. So hopefully you enjoyed the spoon carving and you enjoyed the lovely dust collection of keeping the environment and your lungs clear.